Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm saying this now, YouTube. If you're watching this, please don't give me another copyright strike because
So by this point, I'm sure you know that I'm Amtrak Guy 365. If this is somehow your first Amtrak Guy video, then hi, welcome to the channel. With that known, you might have wondered why I chose the name Amtrak Guy 365. I've explained my username before, Amtrak.
sorry. Because I commented on this video saying I replied to I replied to the guy, the man right here. So here we go. Look, right at the bottom, right here. It says, Amtrak Guy 365, can I please have permission to record your video? So here we go.
So by this point, I'm sure you know that I'm Amtrak Guy 365. If this is somehow your first Amtrak Guy video, then hi, welcome to the channel. So by this point, I'm sure you know that I'm Amtrak Guy 365. If this is somehow your first Amtrak Guy video, then hi, welcome to the channel. With that known, you might have wondered why I chose the name Amtrak Guy 365. I've explained my username before, Amtrak because it's my favorite railroad, Guy because I'm a guy, and 365 which is my favorite Amtrak train, number 365, the Blue Water, from Port Huron, Michigan to Chicago, Illinois. However, one lingering question might remain. Why is Amtrak your favorite railroad, Amtrak Guy? Today, to celebrate Amtrak's 50th anniversary, I thought I'd explain where my appreciation of Amtrak came from and why I still love Amtrak today. One of my earliest memories that I can recall starting around 2005 was of an Amtrak train. I was 3 years old in 2005, and at that time, my mom, dad, and I lived in Texas after their work relocated from Michigan to Mexico. We took the Texas Eagle from San Antonio up to Chicago, and then made our way back into Michigan to visit family for the Christmas season. It's a bit hazy, but I always remember seeing either what I now know as a Phase 3 or 4 Genesis locomotive. It could have also been some variation of Phase 5, but I always somehow recall a Phase 3 or Phase 4 one. By this point early in my life, I was fascinated by trains because of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, Lionel trains, and the multitude of train VHS and DVDs I had, like I Love Toy Trains, I Love Big Trains, Awesome Trains, There Goes a Train, and I Want to Be a Train Engineer. In each of these, at some point, Amtrak was always shown at least once, and I was always just so fascinated by the locomotives, their speed, and the paint schemes of those trains. Then when it came time for my first ever train trip, which was on the Texas Eagle, it was like what I saw on TV came to life. Plus, given it was my first train ride, I'm sure it's some nostalgia bias that I'd begin to like Amtrak. After that first trip, I quickly began to love train travel. I always liked the distant sound of the train horn, the towns and rural scenery rolling by, the way the coach interiors looked, stuff like that. Another oddly specific thing I always remember liking was the old Amtrak luggage tags. I thought those were really interesting. The pictures they used made the places seem almost magical, with an Amtrak train taking you right through it. As I grew a little bit older and we relocated back to Michigan in 2006, I began to get a bit more into gaming than trains. Of course, I still thought trains were cool, but Mario, Sonic, and Kirby were taking over a fair bit. In short, gaming became a big hobby of mine on par with trains, and it still is to this day. However, through all of that, I still was fascinated by Amtrak. I didn't know anything technical like the model name, type of horn. I didn't take any pictures of them because I didn't have a camera. I didn't know anything like that, but just the sight of them continued to intrigue me. Sometime in the late 2000s, I was allowed to pick out a Lionel train set of my choosing. I was debating either an Amtrak set or Thomas the Tank Engine. I ultimately went with Thomas, but still, it was really hard choosing between two things that a young me was obsessed with. Throughout much of my childhood from 2006 into 2013, my mom and I took several trips to Chicago, always by the Blue Water. While in Chicago, I had always thought Union Station was super cool, and at that point, I always associated it with Amtrak, because that's how I always arrived there, plus all of the Amtrak signage that's all over the station. More specifically, I always liked the way that the posters made by Michael Schwab looked. Plus, Chicago was where lots of trains were, and in turn, lots of Amtrak. Because of that, I also grew a fondness towards Chicago, and it remains my favorite big city in the United States. Anyway, it was around this time, about 2012 to 2013, that I finally began to research and learn a bit more about trains. I started to learn about the different locomotive models, paint schemes, horn types, the history of certain railroads, stuff like that. Of course, though, I started with Amtrak, and the first locomotive type I learned the name of? The F40PH. Thus, it became my favorite locomotive. I think my liking of the F40 came from awesome trains as well, because there was a lot of F40s featured in that video. But anyway, just for some reason, I always thought the F40 looked pretty neat, and it just fit Amtrak style really well. Another type I learned was the Genesis, or P40 and P42DC, then realizing those are the locomotives I'd always ridden train trips. In 2013 as well, I decided to make my YouTube channel. Initially, as some of you might know, my original username was TheRailFan365, 365 still denoting my favorite Amtrak train, the Blue Water, because that was the one I had ridden the most, and it was my local Amtrak service. However, I soon changed that to Amtrak Guy 365 to be a bit more specific and unique, but also because Amtrak was for sure my favorite railroad by that point. And what was the first video I made? Well, it was Amtrak oriented, of course. With all that said, what is it nowadays that fascinates me about Amtrak? I'm 19 years old now in 2021, and through most of my years, Amtrak has been there in some way or another. Sometimes I have thought to myself, why exactly do I like Amtrak so much? Because it's a hard question, even for myself, because it's hard to remember a time, if any time, I didn't know about or didn't like Amtrak. To childhood me, Amtrak was the quintessential train, even more so than a steam locomotive sometimes. When I thought of a train, I thought of Amtrak. As a young kid fascinated by the world of trains, the first real one presented to me was an Amtrak train. However, considering I know a lot more about the railroads than I did 10 years ago, I do have other reasonings for liking Amtrak in the year 2021. I'm fascinated by the history of the company. I've always been a history buff in general, but seeing how Amtrak went from a fledgling railroad with rinky-dink equipment to a fully functioning national railroad is really cool. I like the paint schemes and the way they've changed over the decades, and I like the sound of an Amtrak-tuned K5LA air horn rolling into the night, passing through towns that have no names. I like the different types of locomotives, the rolling stock, and the train sets that the railroad has had over the years, and just their overall aesthetics. Speaking of aesthetics, I've taken a great interest in the way Amtrak's graphic design and marketing has changed to correspond with each decade's popular style. In general, though, I just really enjoy traveling by train. It's something different than a car, and you see more than in a plane. You just relax and watch the scenery